Everyone thought she was just old and incompetent. Until she told the story of those trembling hands. In the early hours of the morning, the usual rush had begun at the small coffee corner on Maple Street. This modest café, located near the city's business district, was a stop for white-collar workers in their morning hurry. The space was furnished with old wooden tables, faded patterned curtains, and vintage posters hanging on the walls. It wasn't considered very luxurious, but it was warm and intimate. The ceiling lamp cast a soft light, and gentle jazz music played from the old radio in the corner. Behind the counter stood Eleanor Thompson, 68 years old. Her gray hair was gathered in a simple bun, with some strands falling across her face. Her face bore gentle lines, and her eyes still held a sparkling but tired light. She wore a simple dress with a blue apron and comfortable walking shoes on her feet. But the most noticeable thing was the slight but constant trembling of her hands. This trembling became more pronounced especially when doing delicate tasks. This morning, as always, she had woken early at 5:30, carefully prepared the coffee beans, and got ready to welcome the day's first customers. Eleanor had opened this cafe 3 years ago, after retiring. The locals knew her only as an elderly, lonely woman. They knew very little about her past. They only thought she was kind, quiet, and sometimes moved slowly. At 7:30, the first wave of customers began. A young man in a suit, Daniel Morrison, 32 years old, rushed in with his phone to his ear. He was talking to his manager through his Bluetooth earpiece. "Large latte, extra foam, very urgent," he shouted, hanging up his phone and looking at his watch. "I have an important meeting. I need to be at the office in 15 minutes. Eleanor nodded and turned to the espresso machine. But as her hands trembled while trying to make coffee, she spilled milk and had to clean the machine. As she wiped the counter with paper towels, her hands trembled even more. "Hey, lady," Daniel shouted impatiently, looking at his phone again. "How long is this going to take? I'm really running late. This is such a simple job." Eleanor apologized. "I'm sorry. I'm preparing it right away. Just 1 minute." But her hands trembled again, and this time she dropped the sugar dispenser. Small sugar packets scattered on the floor, some rolling under the tables. Daniel shook his head. "I can't believe it. You can't even do such a simple job? That's old age for you. Maybe it's time to stay home." The customer who came in after him, an elegantly dressed businesswoman, Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, with her expensive bag and high heels, joined the situation. "Really, it can't be this slow. I need to be at the office by 8, and I'm going to get stuck in traffic now." As Eleanor bent down to pick up the sugar packets, her hands began to tremble more. Her face had reddened with embarrassment, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Sarah continued coldly, turning to other customers. "This service level is really unacceptable. At least at Starbucks I can get fast and quality coffee. This is amateur work." At this moment, David Chen, a 45-year-old middle-aged lawyer in an expensive suit and leather briefcase, entered and took a harsh attitude when he saw Eleanor's condition. "Madam, if you can't do this job, why did you open a cafe? Have you heard of customer satisfaction? There's no such slowness in the modern business world." Eleanor, her hands still trembling, was trying to prepare the coffee. The coffee machine was making noise, but the milk frothing was being done clumsily. "Please be patient. I'm trying to do it as quickly as I can." "Fast?" David let out a mocking laugh. "At this pace, it'll take until evening. Maybe it's time to retire, or at least hire someone." Murmurs began to rise among the customers. A few more people joined in, raising their voices so Eleanor could hear. "This woman is not fit for duty. Maybe her family should take care of her. She has hand tremors. She's probably sick. Why is she working? I can't go to work without coffee this morning. I'm going somewhere else." Eleanor heard these words but didn't speak. She just tried to continue her work. But from stress, her hands began to tremble even more, and her breathing quickened. Daniel spoke aggressively as he took his coffee. "I'll forgive it this time, but next time I'm going somewhere else. This standard is really unacceptable. You'll lose customers this way." Sarah couldn't help but add, looking directly at Eleanor. "Old people shouldn't work anymore. They can't keep up with the modern world. This is unfair to us." David went even further. "If she has health problems, she should stay home and watch TV. Why is she slowing us down? There's such a thing as respect for time." Eleanor's eyes had filled up, but she wasn't crying. She was just quietly cleaning the counter, her head bowed. Her hands were trembling so much that she was afraid of dropping the cups. At this tense moment, the cafe door chimed and an elderly man entered. Dr. Richard Henley, 75 years old, white-haired, with elegant posture. He used a cane, but his walk was determined. As soon as he saw Eleanor, his face lit up. "Eleanor, how wonderful to see you here," he said with a warm smile, walking toward the counter. When Eleanor looked up and saw him, she truly smiled for the first time that day. "Richard, how are you? I've missed you so much." Richard approached the counter and noticed Eleanor's hands trembling. With a worried expression, he asked quietly, "Have the Parkinson's symptoms gotten worse? How have you been since the last checkup?" Eleanor nodded. "A bit worse. Mornings are especially difficult, but I'm managing." The customers who heard this conversation began to get curious. Richard turned to Eleanor with a compassionate look. "Do you still miss performing surgery? I was passing by the hospital the other day. They were talking about you." This question hung in the air. The customers were trying to understand what he meant. Eleanor smiled slightly, a nostalgic light appearing in her eyes. "Sometimes. But those days are behind me now. Now I try to touch people's lives in a different way." Richard turned to the customers, smiling. "Do you really know this lady?" Daniel shrugged, somewhat impatiently. "She's the cafe owner. What else could she be?" Richard's smile widened. "This lady is Dr. Eleanor Thompson. For 35 years, she was one of this city's most successful brain surgeons, maybe the best." Silence fell in the cafe. The customers were in shock, looking at each other. Richard continued proudly, "Eleanor, how many brain surgeries did you perform during your career?" Eleanor answered humbly, 2,847 surgeries. 2,791 of them were completely successful. I lost 56 patients. I still remember them." Sarah's mouth fell open. "A brain surgeon? A real doctor?" Richard nodded. "One of the best. We used to call her Golden Hands, because every patient she touched got better. She was a legendary name in the medical school." David couldn't believe it. "But now she can't even make coffee." Eleanor raised her voice, this time speaking more powerfully and determinedly. "I have Parkinson's disease. It was diagnosed 4 years ago. The uncontrolled trembling of hands, loss of muscle control, these are among the most merciless symptoms of this disease." The customers were mesmerized. Eleanor continued, no longer shy. "For 35 years, these hands performed millimetric surgeries under a microscope. They removed brain tumors, repaired aneurysms, turned paralyzed patients into walking people. I used to do 3 to 4 surgeries a day. I worked 12 to 16 hours every day. I created miracles for patient families." Richard added proudly, "Eleanor wrote 127 articles in medical journals. She gave speeches at international conferences. She was a visiting professor at Harvard. Young doctors idolized her." Eleanor looked into the customer's eyes. "But Parkinson's disease forces even the best surgeons to retire, because trembling hands means fatal error in brain surgery. I retired voluntarily because I didn't want to put my patients at risk." Daniel bowed his head in shame, unable to speak. I had no idea," Eleanor continued in a soft but impressive voice. "I opened this cafe because I still want to serve people. Making coffee may not be as delicate as performing brain surgery, but it serves the same purpose in making people happy and giving them warmth." Sarah looked down, ashamed. "Doctor, we were very rude. I'm so sorry." "No," Eleanor replied with a smile. "You just judged based on what you saw. This is very normal, but everyone has a story. Everyone has things they struggle with, things they hide." Richard turned to the customers. This lady gave hope to thousands of families in her life. She saved children from death. Now she continues to do the same thing by making coffee, being kind to people. David spoke in shame. Dr. Thompson, please forgive us. When it comes to a hero like you, our impatience, our rudeness, is truly unforgivable. Eleanor nodded. Who I was in the past isn't very important. Who I am now is important. And I'm an elderly woman trying to make good coffee, trying to make people happy. From that day on, Coffee Corner's customers began to look at Eleanor in a completely different way. Daniel would greet her respectfully every morning, saying, "Good morning, Doctor Thompson," and wait patiently, even pleasantly, until his coffee was ready. Sarah began helping when Eleanor's hands trembled. She would say, "May I help if you allow me?" and pick up sugar packets, sometimes cleaning the counter. David would tell Eleanor's story to his friends and colleagues, saying, "Real heroes are sometimes found in the most unexpected places, in the most ordinary appearances." Eleanor's café gradually became one of the most beloved and respected places in the neighborhood. Customers came not just for coffee, but to listen to her stories and benefit from her wisdom. Because what everyone learned was this: a person's worth is not just based on their current state, the superficial situation you see. And Eleanor, making coffee with her trembling hands every day, continued to combine the miracles of her past with the warmth of today. Because healing was possible not only in the operating room, but also in a small cafe,